When Emily Carter agreed to take her stepson Ryan on a business trip to Chicago, she didn't expect the journey to stir such deep emotions. It had been a year since her husband Mark passed away, and though time had moved on, the house had stayed painfully quiet. Ryan, once cheerful and full of plans, had become distant, locked behind walls of grief she couldn't reach through. Emily missed his laughter, his late-night talks with his dad, and most of all, the sense of family that used to fill their home. So, when she got assigned to attend a 3-day business conference in Chicago, she thought maybe taking Ryan along could help. He had mentioned once that he'd always wanted to see the city, and she hoped the change of place might bring some light back into his eyes. It wasn't just a trip. It was her quiet attempt to reconnect. They left early in the morning, the car humming softly on the highway. Ryan sat in the passenger seat, earbuds in, staring out the window. Emily glanced at him a few times, noticing how much he looked like Mark, his brown hair, calm eyes, and the same quiet confidence. But it wasn't comfort she felt. It was a soft ache. She didn't say much, afraid to push him away with too many questions or attempts at small talk. The radio played low, and they shared a comfortable but distant silence, both lost in their thoughts. By late afternoon, they reached downtown Chicago. The streets were alive with people, traffic, and lights bouncing off tall glass buildings. Emily felt a small rush of excitement. She had always loved cities. But Ryan seemed overwhelmed, looking around quietly as if trying to take it all in. When they reached the hotel, Emily checked in while Ryan handled the luggage. But then, the receptionist frowned slightly. "I'm so sorry, Miss Carter," she said apologetically. "There's been a small issue with your booking. We only have one suite available, and it has a single king-sized bed. The couch in the living area can be made up, though." Emily forced a polite smile, trying not to show her frustration. "That's fine, thank you." Ryan immediately stepped in. "I'll take the couch, no problem," he said quickly, almost as if afraid to make it awkward. As they rode the elevator up, Emily felt a strange mix of emotions. It wasn't embarrassment Ryan was family, but the idea of sharing a space after so much emotional distance felt strange. She wondered if he felt the same way. When they entered the suite, she was relieved to see it was spacious, with a small kitchen, a work desk, and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the glowing skyline. Ryan dropped his bag and walked toward the window quietly. "This view's amazing," he said softly. His tone surprised her, gentle, almost childlike. It had been so long since she'd heard any trace of wonder in his voice. She smiled faintly. "Yeah, it really is." They unpacked quietly. Emily set up her laptop at the desk to review her presentation notes, while Ryan stretched out on the couch, scrolling through his phone. She caught herself glancing at him now, and then still the same boy who used to call her M when he wanted to tease her. She missed that version of him, the easy laughter, the teasing remarks, but the tragedy had changed them both. When evening came, Emily ordered room service. Over dinner, conversation came in small burst-safe topics like travel, sports, and his college classes. Ryan wasn't much of a talker, but his answers were kind and thoughtful. When he asked her about her presentation, she realized he was trying, in his quiet way, to reconnect too. "Do you miss it?" Ryan asked suddenly as he pushed his plate aside. "Miss what?" she asked. "Dad's business trips. He told me you used to travel together sometimes." Emily froze for a second. The memory hit her like a wave: late-night flights, laughter over hotel dinners, Mark holding her hand before big meetings. She smiled faintly. "Yeah, I do. He made everything feel easier." Ryan nodded, eyes down. "Yeah, he had that effect on people." The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable. It was heavy with memories they both shared but never talked about. Emily realized they were both still carrying the same grief, just in different ways. Later that night, Emily stood by the window, looking out at the lights. Ryan had fallen asleep on the couch, a blanket half pulled over him. The soft glow of the city reflected on his face, and she saw the same peaceful expression his father used to have when he slept. She turned away quickly, her chest tightening. It had been so long since she had allowed herself to feel grief, comfort, or even warmth. Losing Mark had frozen something inside her, but seeing Ryan there, peaceful for once, reminded her that love didn't have to vanish with loss. It just needed time and patience to find its way back. As she turned off the lights and slipped into bed, she felt the quiet weight of the day settle over her. The city hummed outside, distant but alive. She thought about how far they had come, not just in miles, but in heart. And before sleep took her, she realized something she hadn't noticed before. Maybe this trip wasn't about business at all. Maybe it was life's way of giving them a second chance to understand, to forgive, and to start healing together. That night, for the first time in a long while, Emily slept peacefully. She didn't dream of loss or regret, only of hope, faint but growing, like the morning light that would soon pour through the Chicago skyline. The next morning came with soft rain tapping against the hotel window. Emily woke up early, feeling the nervous energy that always came before her big presentations. She was grateful to have Ryan there, even if their conversations were still short and careful. He was sitting on the couch, scrolling through his phone when she stepped out in her business suit. "Big day," he said with a small smile. She nodded, trying to sound confident. "Yeah. Wish me luck?" He looked up at her, his brown eyes steady. "You don't need luck. You've got this." It was such a simple thing to say, but hearing it from him meant more than she expected. For months, Ryan had barely spoken more than a few words to her. And now, in that quiet moment, she felt something change, like a wall cracking open just a little. The day passed in a blur. Emily's presentation went better than she'd hoped. Her team praised her ideas, and her boss told her she had done an excellent job. By the time she returned to the hotel that evening, she was exhausted but happy for the first time in a long while. When she opened the door, the smell of food greeted her. Ryan had ordered room service salmon, salad, and even a slice of cheesecake. A note sat on the tray. "You did amazing today." Emily smiled. "You didn't have to do this." Ryan shrugged shyly. "You looked stressed this morning. I thought you might want to celebrate." They ate together, watching the rain fall outside. The conversation came easier this time. Ryan talked about his plans after college, how he wasn't sure what he wanted to do yet, and how he sometimes felt lost since his father's death. Emily listened carefully, trying not to interrupt. "I just don't know where I fit anymore," he said quietly. Dad was the one who always had the answers. She looked at him softly. "It's okay not to have answers. Even grown-ups don't have them all the time." He gave a small, sad laugh. "You sound like him when you say things like that." For a moment, they both smiled, then went silent, thinking about Mark. Later that night, Emily decided to shower before bed. The day's success had lifted her spirits, but her heart still felt heavy. Steam filled the bathroom as the hot water poured down. She closed her eyes, letting the warmth wash away the stress. For the first time in months, she allowed herself to relax completely. She didn't notice how much time had passed until she heard a soft knock. "Emily." Ryan's voice came from outside. "Are you okay? You've been in there a while." Startled, she turned off the water. "I'm fine," she called out, but before she could grab her towel, the bathroom door creaked open slightly. The latch hadn't caught properly. Ryan stood there, half in the doorway, his expression full of concern. Their eyes met for a brief moment through the mist. Emily was startled but not angry. His face showed only worry, not awkwardness. She quickly pulled her robe around herself and said gently, "I'm fine, Ryan. Really?" He stepped back immediately, cheeks red. "I am sorry. I just thought maybe you slipped or something. The water was running so long." "It's okay," she said softly. "Thank you for checking." He nodded quickly and closed the door behind him. Emily stood still for a moment, her heart racing, not because of what had happened, but because of what it revealed. It wasn't embarrassment that filled her. It was realization. Ryan cared. Despite all the distance, all the silence, he still worried about her. That small moment meant more than she could explain. When she finally stepped out of the bathroom, Ryan was sitting on the couch again, pretending to watch TV, though his eyes were unfocused. Emily walked past him quietly, still wrapped in her robe, and sat by the window. The city lights shimmered on the wet streets below, and for the first time in a long while, she didn't feel so alone. Ryan turned toward her after a while. "I didn't mean to barge in," he said carefully. "I just heard the water for so long and thought maybe something happened." She smiled. "It's all right, really." It was. Kind of sweet, actually. He looked embarrassed again but smiled a little. "Guess I still worry too much." "No," she said softly. "You care. That's different." They sat in quiet understanding. There was no awkwardness left, only warmth. Something invisible but gentle had shifted between them. A sense of safety, maybe, or the beginning of trust returning. That night, Emily worked a bit more on her laptop while Ryan read on his phone. The soft sound of rain outside made the suite feel cozy. She glanced at him once and realized how much he had grown, no longer the shy boy she had once met, but not yet the man he was becoming. Life had forced him to grow up too soon. Before heading to bed, Emily said quietly, "I'm glad you came with me." He looked surprised but smiled. "Me too." When the lights went out, Emily lay awake for a while, thinking about the day. The hotel, the rain, the little misunderstandings, it all felt like something meaningful was unfolding. Not romantic, but deeply human. It was as if the universe had brought them here to remind them both that grief didn't have to isolate them. It could connect them if they let it. As she drifted off to sleep, she felt lighter. The walls that grief had built around her heart were beginning to crumble. And though she didn't know what the next days would bring, she knew one thing for sure. The trip was no longer just about business. It was about rediscovering the fragile thread of family, love, and the simple power of caring for someone again. The following evening, the rain had stopped, leaving the city wrapped in a quiet glow. The air felt lighter, yet between Emily and Ryan, something hung unspoken, gentle, uncertain, but full of meaning. They had spent the day walking through the city after her conference ended. They visited the Riverwalk, grabbed lunch at a small cafe, and even laughed at a street performer juggling in the cold. For the first time since Mark's death, they talked freely, not as a grieving stepmother and son, but as two people trying to understand each other again. When they returned to the hotel, both were tired but peaceful. Emily changed into comfortable clothes and made coffee for them. Ryan sat by the window, watching the lights from the cars below. There was a calm silence in the room, not heavy like before, but soft and meaningful. Emily joined him with 2 cups of coffee and handed one over. "You know," she said, "I can't remember the last time we talked this much." Ryan smiled faintly. "Me neither. It feels nice, though." She nodded, looking at the skyline. "It does." For a while, they just sat quietly, sipping coffee and watching the city breathe. The distant hum of traffic and the faint sound of rain starting again made everything feel still. Emily had spent months wishing she could reach him, and now that he was opening up, She didn't want to lose the moment. "Ryan," she said gently, "I know this trip might have been awkward for you, but I'm really glad you came." He glanced at her, thoughtful. "It wasn't awkward. It's just strange, I guess. Being away from home, just the two of us. Strange good or strange bad?" she asked with a soft smile. He laughed quietly. "Strange good. I think we both needed this." His honesty warmed her. She hadn't realized how much she missed his natural kindness, his way of speaking gently but truthfully. For a moment she saw Mark in him again, not his face, but his heart. After a long pause, Ryan's voice lowered. "I miss him every day, Emily. Some days I pretend I don't." Emily set her cup down, her throat tightening. "I know, I miss him too. Every single day." He turned toward her, his expression open. "After the funeral, I didn't know what to do. I didn't want to talk to anyone. You were hurting, and I didn't want to make it worse." She looked at him, tears gathering. "You could never make it worse. I thought you didn't want me around. I tried to give you space, but maybe I gave you too much." Ryan shook his head. "You didn't do anything wrong. I just didn't know how to be in that house without him. Everything reminded me of him. Even the smell of coffee in the morning." Emily's voice trembled. "It reminded me too. That's why I started drinking tea instead." He looked surprised. "I never noticed." She smiled sadly. "That's the thing about grief, it makes us blind to each other's pain." For a long moment, neither spoke. The city outside seemed to fade away, leaving just the quiet between them. Then Ryan said softly, "I didn't mean to pull away from you, Emily. I just didn't know how to face losing another person I cared about." Tears slipped down her face before she could stop them. "You haven't lost me, Ryan. You never will." Something inside him broke open. He leaned forward, his voice unsteady. "You were always there for Dad. You made him happy. And even after he died, you stayed strong for both of us. I should have said thank you a long time ago." Emily reached out, her hand brushing his arm, a simple human gesture, full of understanding. "You don't have to thank me. We both survived the same storm. We just took different paths through it." The air between them shifted warmer now, lighter. They weren't mother and stepson trapped by silence anymore. They were two hearts finally speaking the truth. They stayed by the window, talking about Mark, sharing memories they had never dared to bring up. Ryan told her about the fishing trip he and his dad took the summer before he died. Emily told him about the way Mark used to write her little notes and hide them in her suitcase before her business trips. They laughed, they cried, and with each story, the heaviness lifted. At one point, Ryan said quietly, "He would have loved this view." Emily nodded. He would have said something poetic like, "The city never sleeps, just like love never dies." Ryan laughed through his tears. "That sounds exactly like him." Their laughter faded into a comfortable silence. Outside, the rain began again, soft and rhythmic. The city lights reflected off the wet glass, painting the room in gentle gold and silver. It felt almost peaceful, like the world had paused just to give them this moment. After a while, Emily noticed Ryan staring at the skyline, lost in thought. "What's on your mind?" she asked. He hesitated, then said, "For the first time since Dad died, I don't feel angry anymore. I just feel thankful. Thankful that I still have someone who cares." Her heart swelled. "You'll always have that, Ryan." When the clock neared midnight, Emily finally stood up. "We should sleep," she said softly. He nodded but didn't move. "Thanks, Emily, for everything." She smiled gently. "No, Ryan, thank you for letting me in again." As she turned off the lights, she looked back one last time. Ryan was still sitting by the window, staring at the city lights. But his face looked peaceful, calm in a way she hadn't seen since before Mark's death. Emily lay down, her heart lighter than it had been in a year. That night, there were no tears, no guilt, no silence, just two people who had finally found their way back to each other. And though nothing dramatic happened, everything important did. The business trip that began with quiet tension had turned into something unexpected, a journey of healing, forgiveness, and love that didn't need words to be real. Sunlight poured through the wide hotel windows, soft and golden after 2 days of rain. Emily woke to the faint sound of the coffee machine and the quiet hum of the city below. For a moment, she lay still, feeling a strange calm in her chest. No rush, no heaviness, just peace. When she stepped out of the bedroom, Ryan was standing by the counter, holding 2 mugs of coffee, his hair still messy from sleep. "Morning," he said with a small smile. "Morning," she replied, surprised by how natural it felt. "You made coffee?" "Yeah. I figured you'd need it before the drive back." She smiled and took the cup from him. "Thank you. You've learned something useful on this trip already." He chuckled. "Guess so." They sat at the small dining table, the soft light touching their faces. It felt different now. No tension, no awkwardness, only quiet understanding. The last few days had opened a door neither of them knew was still there. The silence that once felt like distance now felt comfortable, almost warm. Emily looked at him and said softly, "You know, I'm really glad you came with me. I wasn't sure at first, but this trip meant more than I expected." Ryan looked thoughtful for a moment. "Me too. I think I needed it more than I realized." He glanced toward the window, where the morning light caught the raindrops still clinging to the glass. "It's weird," he continued. "I thought coming here would make me feel more lost. But somehow, it feels like I found something again." Emily nodded, understanding exactly what he meant. "Maybe we both did." After breakfast, they started packing. Emily folded her clothes neatly while Ryan gathered his things from the living room. The hotel suite already felt different, less like a space filled with memories of silence and more like a place where something new had quietly begun. As she zipped up her suitcase, Emily glanced at Ryan. "You've changed a lot, you know. I can see your father in you every time you speak." He paused, holding a shirt in his hands. "He was the best person I ever knew. If I'm even a little like him, I'm doing something right." She smiled. "He'd be proud of you." He looked at her with that same calm expression his father once had. "He'd be proud of you too." The words hit her harder than she expected. For months, she had been carrying guilt for not doing enough, not being strong enough after Mark's death. Hearing those words from Ryan felt like a quiet forgiveness, not just from him, but from herself too. When they checked out, the lobby was busy with travelers, but Emily barely noticed the noise. She watched Ryan talk to the front desk clerk, polite and confident. He wasn't the withdrawn young man who had barely spoken at home anymore. He seemed lighter, more at ease with the world. Outside, the city sparkled under the clear sky. They walked to the car, and for the first time in a long while, Emily didn't feel like they were strangers living under the same roof. She felt like they were family again. The drive home was peaceful. The radio played soft music as the miles passed. Ryan talked about school, about maybe switching majors, and about a photography class he wanted to take. Emily listened, truly listened, smiling every now and then. "That sounds great," she said. "You always had an eye for pictures. Mark used to say you saw stories in everything." Ryan smiled at the memory. "Yeah, he said that all the time." He turned to her. "You think he'd be okay with me changing direction?" "I know he wanted me to do engineering." She shook her head gently. "He wanted you to be happy. That's what mattered most to him. He'd be proud that you're finding your own path." He nodded, his expression softening. "Thanks. I needed to hear that. The road stretched ahead, golden under the afternoon sun. They drove in silence for a while, but it was the kind of silence that feels complete. Emily glanced at him, focused on the road, relaxed, peaceful, and felt a quiet joy bloom inside her. By the time they reached home, the sky had turned pink. Emily parked in the driveway and turned off the engine. For a moment, neither moved. Ryan looked at the house and took a deep breath. Feels different now, he said. Yeah, she replied softly. Maybe it's us who change. They carried their bags inside. The house smelled faintly of old memories, but it didn't feel heavy anymore. The pictures on the wall of Mark, of all three of them smiling on past trips, no longer brought pain. They brought comfort. Later that evening, as Emily stood in the kitchen making dinner, Ryan came in holding an old framed photo of the three of them from a vacation years ago. We look so happy here, he said. Emily smiled. We were. And we can be again. He nodded, setting the frame on the counter. Yeah, I think we're getting there. When dinner was ready, they ate together, laughing at small things, sharing stories. The atmosphere was simple and warm, like a piece of life returning after being gone too long. After dinner, Ryan stood to help clear the table. You know, he said thoughtfully, this trip really did change everything. Emily looked up at him. How so? He smiled. It made me remember that family doesn't end when someone's gone. It just changes shape. And sometimes it takes time to see that. Her eyes softened. You're wiser than you think, Ryan. He grinned. Must run in the family. That night, after he went to bed, Emily sat by the window with a cup of tea. The world outside was quiet, the stars faint but clear. She thought of the hotel, the rain, the long talks, and that small moment of care that had started it all. The trip hadn't just been about business. It had been a turning point. It had given them a space to talk, to heal, and to see each other not through grief, but through love. And as Emily sat there, she realized something simple and beautiful. Healing doesn't always come in grand gestures. Sometimes it begins with a single act of kindness. A worried knock on a bathroom door, or a shared cup of coffee in the morning light. The business trip was over, but what it left behind was far more lasting hope, peace, and the quiet beginning of a new chapter for both of them.